Hello, here we are again with Mookie Tenembaum. We are exploring through these videos his philosophy, his disillusionism, his nostalgic theory about human behavior as a way of avoiding and preventing suffering. And as many of you already know, we are trying to apply these concepts to everyday life, to current situations as they develop. We are in September 2021 now, amidst the COVID pandemic, like we've been since the beginning of these videos. But today we are going to try and look at something we haven't discussed yet, which is sex life during the pandemic and the impact the pandemic, the lockdowns in many places, the new possibilities open to lives have had on sex life as we knew it, and to try and see what this means from a nostalgic, from a philosophical point of view.
Okay, first of all, let me tell you that when we're talking about sex, it's an activity that takes probably minutes in a week for almost everybody, I guess, and some people a little bit more. But for being such an infrequent activity, it has a lot of impact on all of us, unless you're talking about reproduction. That's an issue we'll talk at some point. But the most important thing now is to understand what happened the time we were finally locked down. I mean, we got locked, all of us, everywhere in the world, a little bit more, a little bit less. Some countries didn't have. But two things happened. One, you could not go out, and that means your social life was dead, and your sex life, if you didn't have it at home, was in peril. We'll talk about it. And the second one, even if you can go out, intimacy is a danger. Yes, you can get COVID, or you can give COVID. I mean, it's really, really problematic. People got a little bit scared. Reminds me a little bit of the time of the HIV, but it's even worse because in HIV you put a condom, problem solved. Here there was no problem solved if you wanted intimacy. Until here, we agree. So what happened? What happened is that you have to find an alternative once you are stuck. That alternative existed, and it came out. We all remember. Yes, it began with pornography in newspapers, and in magazines, and afterwards in videos, and eventually it got to pornography in the web when everybody got. But it was always a marginal thing. Even the people who accessed until this pandemic accessed this area. It was marginal. Even then, it was marginal because there was presential, actual sex, and it was much more fun than what you saw there. And we were all sleepwalking into it. Yes. So the moment everything stopped, we had to move into the sex that was there on the web, and the sex was not only porn; it was the webcams. First of all, Florencio, what do you think about my description?
I of course agree with the general scheme of things. We have discussed it on different subjects, not only with sex. Something of the early days of the pandemic worked as a reset, worked as a sort of restart, where the way we used to sleepwalk, our usual habits were interrupted, and so in a way we were forced to reshuffle and rethink what we were doing, and that of course brings forth opportunities. But I think the main difference in this particular aspect has to do with the interactive possibilities that new technologies provide, because as you said, pornography was always there. Of course, it's easier to access pornography once you are connected to the internet, when you have portable devices, when you tap on the digital world. But I think the main difference between what we are seeing today in terms of digital intimacy is that you have a lot of possibilities for interaction, for real-time interaction that you didn't have in the old days. So I know there were hotlines and people were over the phone chatting with someone, but as you said, this was not prevalent. This was just very few instances. Whereas now, I think in many areas, the technological substitute outperforms the original carnal material possibilities. So I'd like us to focus on this renewed means of interaction over the internet, if you think that that's something we can do.
Florencio, I don't like chicken, but if there is nothing else to eat, I'll eat chicken. So this is part of the whole story. Once there was no possibility, or it was very complicated to have sex, I'm not talking about people who have sex at home, which that was preserved partially, okay? Because one of the things of having sex at home was not to see each other all day. Yes, and then suddenly you see it was I think sex life became problematic during even the home at home sex. But we're talking about the outside one, and we're talking about the West. Yes, of course, in Pakistan that didn't change too much. Yes, but for the other people, this was the only alternative. Now, the alternative is not just porn, in which you are watching something that happened in the past, that somebody was doing, and you try to tell yourself it's happening now. No more need for that, because webcams, who were already on the march before before this, webcam became prevalent, and the market exploded in webcams. Why? Once, because there is demand, because people don't have other sex. Two, because prostitutes are out of job, out of work, so they went into the webcam. So what happens there? And there was a very interesting poll made in the US and England, but they asked people, tell me, how have you ever tried virtual sex? And the number that said yes was outstanding, 58%. And these are people who were ready to answer yes. I'm sure there is a percentage that was under many reasons, paranoid, shame, etc., and they say no. So we can safely say that the number is quite higher than that. But just 58% is a huge number. Now, this happens because people were stuck at home and they tried. Now, let me explain you how the webcam market works. This is very interesting. You have tens of thousands of webcams all over the world, of women or men preparing to do what you're bidding, what you ask them to do. It could be one way, or it could be each other looking at each other. It could be 1 minute, or it could be an hour. In fact, 1 minute cost, give or take, $1 an hour, $1 a minute. You can find more expensive and you can find cheaper even. But that number, $1 an hour, is the number. So that means that it's $60, it's 1 hour. $60, 1 hour of sex, yes? Not of going out for dinner, yes? Not include the movie, yes? And not including all the other things that we'll talk about it afterwards. So this is pure sex, 60 minutes, $60. Prostitution was probably more than that, or maybe at least that. But that was it. You have to go to a prostitute, and the whole process. Forget the process. Forget how you look at yourself. The whole problem of the moral conscience of going to a prostitute and so forth. Here there is a prostitute. On the other side, it's still the same, but it's not the same, of course, because there are many advantages. But to understand that now the variety of the menu is huge. If you want, you can have sex with a person of a different race, of a different age. You see, when you are an old guy or an old woman and you want to have sex, you may find somebody of your age, maybe a little bit younger, but that's it. You can not aspire to be to have a free, a non-paying sexual relation with somebody 30 years you're young. That didn't happen. You won't even try. And again, the amount of people, the market in which to look for people was restrained to who you know. Sometimes you could go to Tinder. Yes, I'm not. But again, Tinder is maybe yes, maybe no. you have to show a dog. I heard that Tinder works better if you show a dog. I'm not joking. That's there's certain things that but in here you can, and not only that, not only you can go to somebody who is much younger than you, yes, or prettier than you. When you do it, you can play any fantasy you had, almost any fantasy you have, and worse than that, or sorry, better than that, or different than that. I'm afraid of giving it a value. Is that while you look at the webcams, because they are all alive, yes, they're all doing something. When you are looking at that webcam, you may find something you never thought of. Your fantasy may become part of your life, of your sexual life. This is just amazing if you think about it. So what are I would say, the benefits you have from all this? The first one has to do with probably guilt or shame. Guilt or shame, I think, are the two issues that you can avoid by using the webcam. There is no shame when you are in a webcam. So going back to what I was saying is that guilt and shame are being avoided by using this. Guilt maybe, but it's quite guiltless if somebody is in Baguio City in the Philippines doing something you ask them to do. And not only that, the technology includes today with VR. So there is another person having sex in your name, like a power of attorney, in your name, in the camera on the other side. So it's very close to real life sex. Of course, you don't feel physically, but there are already in the market physical objects from different companies that go to replace and can be managed from afar. So a woman can have a personal gratification element in her vagina, and the man can move it, can make it, control it. So listen, this is almost sex. And I am sure you're going to ask me about the disadvantages, the advantages of sex, no?
But as you said in the beginning of our argument, there was not an alternative. It was simply during lockdown. But when you look back at this, where we are today, where we are right now, where traditional encounters might be getting traction again, I see what you point out as having pros and cons of both sides. And I wanted to ask you, you mentioned it by passing. I rapidly see the disadvantages, the pains, the algias we avoid going to this alternative, because there's no shame, no guilt. This, I would say, lots less frustration, less risks involved of every sort. But I wanted to ask you about the whole, I would say, paraphernalia, the whole industries that went around traditional sex, the dating game, the places we had to go, the presents we used to buy, the clothing we would don, the makeup, the barber shops. I think there was, in our traditional way of life, a huge network of everyday elements that depended on our willingness to get material, physical sex at the end of them.
Well, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about the whole industry that around dating. Yes, I'm not talking only about dating apps, which we mentioned. We're talking about restaurants. We're talking about hotels. We're talking about flower shops. We're talking about gift shops, and I can think of many other things. Clothing. I mean, when you are in a lockdown or you are using a webcam, the other person doesn't care if you're dressed or if you are naked. He doesn't care if you have a beard or you're 85 years old. They don't care about anything. It's because it's a prostitute. It's like a real life prostitute. In fact, it's easier than a real life prostitute. A real life prostitute may have may have a problem of not liking. I mean, here in this case, they are in a camera. There is nothing. It is sterile. So what happened to all these industries? Well, the restaurants, of course, have a bigger problem than this one, but still,
it's not just new couples that are not going to restaurants. No one is going to a restaurant.
No going. But there are restaurants that are more common for couples. There is all this industry is either disappeared or in the way to disappear. Yes, who is going to be able to stand the clothing? I mean, we're talking about a lot of people not buying clothes, and that industry is based on really not using that blue shirt that she saw last time when I went out with her. The whole industry is based on that.
Going back to the algias, going back to the suffering involved, to the pain we avoid, I can see how doing away with sleepwalking, taking away what was usual for us, what we did just because we were used to do it, not thinking about it. If we go back at the process and think about it and take a look at it, I can see how maybe the calculations, maybe the results look different after 2 years. I myself, I can speak for myself. I don't know about society in general, but there are many things I used to do that I'm starting to rethink in the light of what's happening. And if this technology becomes widely available and widely known, and more people, as you said with this example, sort of take a bite at the forbidden fruit, you know, if you try it and see what happens. I'm thinking about webcams as you describe them, paying webcams, but I'm also thinking about people who just engage in digital intimacy because they both want to, not a commercial transaction, but people who might be away from each other, apart from each other in different cities and just enjoy getting together over the internet. I think there's maybe a whole new world there for us to explore. And maybe from a nostalgic point of view, it makes a lot of sense.
But there are different gadgets today that resemble sexual organs. That can be managed from afar, yes, by Wi-Fi. Yes, this is something that already exists, and they start being used. We are start seeing coming in very, very fast because of the pandemic. Pandemic is an accelerator of all this.
No.
And think of all the advantages this has. It is safe. You cannot get COVID, HIV, gonorrhea, syphilis, any STD. You cannot get it from this kind of sex. The second thing is it is safe. It is safe for everybody. It is safe for the prostitute. It is safe for you. The third one, it is anonymous. I mean, really, you can be in your bath with your telephone. That's it. Even in your own home, you have your headphones.
No one has to know.
No one has to know. And then it's cheap. I told you it's $1 a minute. I mean, it's very cheap. It doesn't have to become. It's not only for stingy people. Yes, but it is affordable. The word is affordable. And you don't have to go anywhere. I mean, you can sit in your home, and when you have to date, you have to go and then risk. You see, prostitute is not a risk, I agree. But again, the menu of the prostitutes and the problematic and everything else that I told you about not being safe, all that makes it a very good alternative. And if this alternative is like now, the only alternative, of course. But the problem is once people will get to sleepwalk using this kind of sex. Once the choice is going to the computer every time you're interested in sex, instead of waking your partner or calling the phone and hoping. And I'm sure that that our people who listen will find other advantages to that. Again, this would not have happened if there would have been no lockdown. We would still be on the sleepwalking on the other side. The moment you sleepwalk here or you stop sleepwalking in your carnal relationship spin wheel, yes, in that thing that in which you go, the moment that happens, everything goes back to we're back to square one. What will happen afterwards? We will talk in the next week.
Yeah, that's what I was going to tell you. We are actually out of time. We went beyond our usual time for these videos, but we can go back to the future. We can go back to what's next in this subject next week. I think it would be interesting to try and cover not what's already happened, what's happening around us, but the consequences this might have economically, socially, demographically, politically in the not so distant future.
And remember, the players, those who run the illusions, those who run the countries, haven't said we haven't heard of them yet. And we will. This is some of the things we'll speak. So next week, it will be part 2. Okay, this is part
Perfect.
1. This is sex during the pandemic, and the next one will be sex
after
the pandemic, hopefully at some point.
Perfect. See you next time.
See you next time.
If you enjoyed the video, please like it, comment and subscribe.